It's showtime. I want to ask immediately our producer, Laurie Strickland and Chester. We have two producers. One of whom is Laurie, Jill Strickland. The other is a dude named Chester, and they are presiding over events. As is Dragon Taylor, great sound man. But other than that, it's sort of a one-man show, and I'm checking the sound is okay, and the I presume it is. This is a solo show for November. It's November 20th, 2025, and this is going to be what I'm calling piano and talk. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my life and a little bit about my music, not too much, hopefully. And then I'm going to play some of that music. So I'm going to start from the impetus or the reason that we're here. I'm sitting in this chair next to this 1981. I think it's 1981. I thought it was 79, but it's more or less ballpark there. Steinway piano. And the reason is that I developed a style of music that I came up with the phrase, thinking about the phrase easy listening music, which was a popular phrase in the 60s and 70s. Some people called it muzak and this kind of very instrumental music. I said I wanted to create a form of specifically solo piano music that I was going to call hard listening. I've done two whole albums in this vein, which is a lot to have done, I think. And I'm saying 2013, 2014, those are the kind of the years where I was developing it. And I don't want to talk too much about it, but I inevitably have to talk about it because I'm going to perform two selections in that style. The first will be the very first hard listening piece I wrote in 2013 called the Royal Blue Trickle Suite for piano. Royal Blue Trickle Suite. That's S-U-I-T-E, Suite for piano. And then the thing I just wrote this past month, brand new, which I call précis. Précis, which is a French feminine word for what we would say in English is carefully precise, exactitude, precise, very exacting. Précis. Of the two albums of hard listening, the second one I think is the best album, for which there's no physical copy, the volume 2. You could check both of them out, but the idea for that is just not to go on for too long, is that some of the first non-classical piano music I ever heard was solo piano music would probably have been two greats, two giants of solo piano, and of course I mean Art Tatum and Keith Jarrett, two different generations. But Keith Jarrett had devised his own concept in the 70s of sitting at the piano and playing what comes to him spontaneously in the moment. And he was very interested in not preparing, as he always loved to say. Sometimes he could get on his soapbox about these things, which he was wont to do. Not thinking of music. Don't think of things and don't prepare. And he, performed all over the world for, 40 years? And the Cone concert, and there was one album that really influenced me from 1975, and comes to my next thing I want to discuss is how I got interested in music to begin with. And anyhow, I would lay on between the ages of, really starting as a toddler, but mainly 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, I would listen to music. on old stereo systems, LPs, records, and I listened to Keith Jarrett. But I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to take the idea of taking solo piano seriously, instead of having it be all improvised or only at the moment, making it a matter of writing things out beforehand, which means it's putting me in touch with the tradition of classical composition. And so I got the idea, I'm going to have it be not only half improvised, because I always improvise, but not 100% improvised, and half written. And then the idea is that the pieces would end up being long. Now, it isn't that I particularly like long pieces of music, or that I set out to do this. It's that I was following the mode of European concert piano music, in which the pieces, aren't just 4 minutes. And the Royal Blue Trickle Suite is in different sections, and even this latest work that I wrote this month is in different sections. So it would have the structural feeling of your classical music. But all of the language, the syntax, the gestures would be from the widest, maybe not the widest, wide branch of American popular music. So not things like seventh chords, if you know what those are. And the bebop music I loved. And also just pop from the 50s and 60s. Hollywood, Broadway, and that would kind of weave all that together and come up with these compositions. And I've been working at this for 12 years. It's hard to believe, actually. And I actually just, look at this stack of music. This is basically everything I've written since more or less pandemic to now in this vein, and typically, I would write the little sections and write it out. Now it's not to be pretty, and it's not to, and some of this stuff is stuff I do with the trio. And as usual, it's all in different, it's all apart. But it's, fun to write things down. It's fun, actually, if that's a word I normally not crazy about, but I'll use it here. It's kind of fun to prepare some things, have things be set on paper in stone. But it's also fun to improvise, and so I wanted to do both. But some things about me might surprise you, really surprise you, that make my biography, career as a musician, highly uncharacteristic. One of those things is that I started music very, very late in life, in relation to most musicians. I did not know this back in the 70s, actually, really, because I didn't think about it that much. But musicians, I started hearing about this when I first started piano. Kids starting at the age of 3 and 4. I was not able to do that. There were no musicians in my family. Also, unlike most musicians, if you look at the biographies of musicians, their dad was a musician, their mom played piano, they have siblings, and all of this bounty, I didn't have any of that. And that in itself has actual consequences, not only for ill, but maybe for good, in terms of the challenge of not having access to that. Also, I had certain deficits, cognitive deficits, believe it or not. For example, I can't really sing. I can't sing in tune naturally. And when you're a child and you're forced into music, because children are forced into music, they're always shoved into a choir or chorus, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I was in Tampa, Florida, and so, but I had these, I was listening, I'll tell you the music I was listening to, was all from records. No bands, no fellow musicians, no peers playing music, none of that. No access to an instrument. I got my first ability to learn piano only at the age of 8 or 9. 8, 9, 10, one of those 3 years. And it was very slow going. Very slow going. But before I started piano as an 8, 9-year-old, I was listening to, say, the Keith Jarrett record, and I was also listening to all this, this music on LP, and I would lay on my back, usually on my back, and study this music that I loved for hours on end. And I would, for hours on end, over and over and over and over again. I listened to all the Charlie Parker, Bebop, Bud Powell, Charlie Parker, the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, the White Album, the Bach Brandenburg Concerto, because this is what was around, some Bessie Smith blues, and also some of this piano stuff. Later on, at the age of 11 and 12, I got exposed to what we call avant-garde music, about which I was profoundly and remain profoundly ambivalent. Some of it I liked, some of it was also what was in the air at that time. So I started piano late, and I was a slow learner. And so when I started piano, I had these experiences listening to albums, records, and occasionally, so what would happen? Occasionally, we would go, as a big deal, go out to a concert. One concert that really stays with me, almost as if I heard it last night, was seeing the Jackson 5 in Madison Square Garden in 1972 when I was still in New York. So I moved from New York to Tampa. So the Jackson 5 in Madison Square Garden, the sound of all these children, the roar, there's always the roar of the kids. They were loud. And the sound of that band, I knew. So hearing the Jackson 5, I knew that I loved this kind of music. Above all, many other kinds of music. I just knew that. Of course, I don't sing. I can't sing. I didn't, but I just like the sound, like the groove. And a lot of that, some of that music finds its way into the music I do today. Always will play a role. I went to a Baroque concerto because her name was Debbie. Debbie was I guess she was a pre-law student in the early 70s who kind of would take care of me sometimes when my mom and dad got too busy. Beautiful blonde girl, looked like Sharon Tate, actually, my memory. And she was, her boyfriend was studying oboe, and we went to this Baroque concert, early music of Baroque in 1972, and the people behind me were really loud, chattering, and I turned around and went shh like that. I would do that when people were too loud. This insufferable kid telling people to shush, doing a classical concert. And I like that music. I love the Keith Jarrett. I didn't understand what it was. I remember excited. I used to watch Saturday Night Live every Saturday with the family. It was exciting when Keith Jarrett was the guest artist on Saturday Night Live. To hear that kind of music presented that way. But I didn't really know. I mean, I knew some things, and a lot of this stuff was before. So, for example, another memorable experience listening to music is that I would sometimes local people. My dad would often take me to hear, some local music, and there was some kind. This is a vivid. One of the most vivid memories I have is a boy. He must have been, I want to say 16 or 17, and I was many years younger. You see, it was like around the same year as Star Wars, 77. We went to see Star Wars and all that stuff. And at that culture, there was a mall culture. And shopping malls, they would have live music in the 70s and 80s. They wouldn't just have movie theaters showing Star Wars or the Eyes of Laura Mars or whatever they were showing. Benji, they would have local. And one of these local musicians was a 17-year-old African-American kid. And he was sitting in front of a sort of a bank, a stack of electric keyboards. And this absolutely fascinated me because the only thing I knew about electric keyboards is I'd see them on TV and in record album covers, all these synthesizers, Moog, and I thought this was the most exotic instruments that made these sounds, and I thought they would just, I was. Anyhow, when I saw this kid play, he sat down to play, and the way he played, the way he phrased reminded me of my Ramsey Lewis records. I'm saying this kid plays just like Ramsey Lewis. The feeling, the soul. He had a very high afro, one of the largest I think I'd seen. I stood behind him, but he had more than one. It was an organ, and then it was some kind of and I think it wouldn't have been me, but my dad, I think, said something to him about how I loved his music. My dad said this. I didn't say this because I was just too entranced really to talk to him. I was kind of in awe. Kind of wanted to learn how to do that. Wanted to learn how to get that sound. And so, I'm tempted to go over to the piano and do a little something talking about this. Why did that stay with me? Well, it was the sound of the instrument. I didn't know whatever happened to him. Because this was 77, 78. Right around that time, I started piano lessons with a very strict Italian teacher, Violetta Mendesi. And I did everything by rote, very laborious, step by step, week after week of lessons and playing these little, that kind of stuff. And then 5-finger exercises and all this stuff. And the first piano I had, I think, was a Sommer upright. Before this one, for the 79, 80, 81 piano. And I had to suffer with that upright for a couple of years, and I felt everything came so slow. So slow. I had to learn these pieces, and so I had to turn off the part of my, I guess they would say, my brain that wanted to play like Chick Corea and Ramsey Lewis and the 17-year-old kid that sounded like Billy Preston. That's what Ramsey Lewis and Billy Preston. I sat behind him, turned it off. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to follow what Mendesi says, and I'm going to play these little sonatinas, Clementi, and see what happens. And the most I can say is that I love the sound of the piano. Love being able to finally touch the piano. Because I had fantasized about playing the piano for years and never saw one. Never got next to one. Imagine. All I had were these records. And twice a year seeing a concert. That was it. Didn't know any musicians. Didn't know anybody in a band. So I learned these little pieces. And you'd get like little report cards on your music, and they had something called the Friday morning music guide. You go down there in the summer in the Florida heat. I got a picture for you. Let me show you this. This is me. Yours truly. Look at that. This picture was taken in 1980. So I'd have been like somewhere in there. This was the very first recital I did of music. And for my first recital, I had all these old Broadway music books that they had in those years, the greatest hits of country. And I was in love with a movie called Some Like It Hot, of course, right? Who wouldn't be, right? And there were some great songs in that movie. Billy Wilder, Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, and I said, I'm going to play Stairway to the Stars, and I took all of these I compiled this medley of all these songs. There was some West Side Story. And this is the first accomplished thing I ever did was taking this sort of commercial sheet music and trying to duplicate more or less what was on the sheet music, basically in the classical piano style of how classical students learn. Not a second of improvisation, nothing. Not knowing what Bud Powell was doing. Listening to it constantly, all day listening to the great jazz pianist, like my book back there, but not knowing how to do it. But I said, if I just follow these commercial sheet music and just communicate the melody to the audience of Stairway to the Stars, or It's Only a Paper Moon, and these songs of the 30s and the 40s that had been big in the movie Paper Moon by Bogdanovich in the 70s, and maybe people will enjoy it. And people came out to this thing, they liked it, and I was just playing, you know. That's like the first thing I did that was kind of being professional, you know, playing in public. This old show music, and no improvisation yet. I didn't feel like I knew how to do it. I would literally spend sometimes 1, 2, 3 hours trying to figure out how to do it. And it would be like this. This first time I sat at the piano, I didn't know really what I was doing, right? So I didn't know. So I would go, you know. I could get a sound out of the instrument, but I just figure if I just did the white keys, and I would just use my ears, see if it sounded good or not. That kind of thing. Didn't sound like that, but maybe if I was really daring, I would introduce a black note. The black keys, the white keys. So the two kinds of music I was listening to at that time, with which I was most enthralled, was this kind of complex, straight-ahead jazz, you know, like it could bebop. And also African-American popular music. I watched Soul Train every Saturday. Jackson 5. You know, the Ramsey Lewis. And these were very different styles of music. They were related historically. And they were related sociologically, of course, but they were different. I was never really... I loved classical music, and I had to learn it in terms of just the history of it. But it was never my first love. You know, I would hear, I was excited about Vladimir Horowitz, and there's all this lore for piano players, you know, pianists, different piano techniques and things. So when I was starting to, you know, get decent at piano, I would get reports, and they would say I had a good touch, and they would say I had a good feeling, which is always good. It's always important to me for music to have feeling, you know, make the audience feel something. But I ended up hanging out with all of these older musicians at camps and things. I'd finally met other musicians, other pianists, and I was the youngest one. I was the baby. These older teenagers, you know, and it was just wild, you know. In the late 70s, early 80s. There's a picture of me. Love this picture. This is me. Look at me. I'm the youngest. I'm in front there in that suit. Dressed the same way then that I dress now. I just don't have the hair. But look at all those 70s looking kids behind me. This dude here with the shades, he'd get in trouble with the counselors. This is at Florida State University or FSU. He would get in trouble because he would actually not be there for curfew. He'd be out going to the discos. This one with the shades. And yeah, you can get a sense. This kid and I got this Asian kid here. Him. I think he and I got into a fight. I don't remember why. And he bent my ear. It really hurt. Those are interesting years. I don't know, you know. So when I met these kids, I just felt, you know, I should give this up. I was ready to give it up. I thought, these kids are so good. They're fast. That's not even to say 3 years after that, in the early 80s, 82, 83, 84, I met people who are now superstars. So I met, I don't want to drop names, but a kid named Larry Goldings, who told me he was studying with Keith Jarrett. Keith Jarrett was his teacher. I think, well, Jesus, this guy I was listening to for 14 years since I was a young boy, and he's teaching this guy, Larry. And Larry would sit at the piano and improvise these things, which I wanted to do. So here's an interesting, I love to use the word philosophy to describe. It's a philosophical question. If you really, really love something, but you think you're slow at it, can the love see you through to getting good at it? And I think the answer is yes. Sometimes yes, right? Because I love the sound, that 17-year-old kid's sound, and I wanted to sound like that. And so also inspiration. So my peers were really good, but that was the least of the marvels, I think, for me in those years. The other thing was the actual teachers. Now, the teachers were themselves just 20, 21. And I was at these little wooden practice rooms. You go in these practice rooms. I was just playing all this very simple, I was just starting Mozart sonatas. Trying to learn Scarlatti for the fingers. It's really tough. Scarlatti and these really intricate, these intricate things. And one of they called them counselors, RVs, resident hall. I don't know these terms. I'm not up on all this education stuff. I'm sure it's all changed since then. Sat down at the piano and started playing Bud Powell like bebop. And he said, hey Mitch, is this kind of music? He did. He started playing like that. I'd heard that in records. I said, well, how do you? And he said, well, here's Mitch. These kind of. This is a foundation of music. He said, this is something I got from Bud Powell. He sat down and read. And he played very. Improvising, it's not written. He sounded something like that. He said, well, Mitch, you want to learn these kinds of things. Just this kid, I didn't know, he started playing like that. Where did he get that from? So I was kind of like I didn't know, I thought, well, this is really something. So I guess to hear somebody doing that makes you want to figure out how to do it. But it all seemed very both approachable and non-approachable at one and the same time. But the Eastman School of Music is very. There were some phenomenal musicians there, like the person I mentioned and some other people. And also hang out with older people. That's just hanging out with older kids, young adults, counselors. And just plugging away and seeing, trying to get good or get better. To speak in a folksy manner about it. So I'm not really going to talk a lot about what I'm going to play. I'm just going to play it. But it'd be interesting as bookends to show the very first of this solo piano project, the Royal Blue Trickle Suite, I'm going to play that. I'm going to change it slightly from the original recording because after all, I did it in 2013 and this is 2025 and I have not really looked at it since. So when I'm sitting down, I'm not improvising. It's partly prepared, but it's partly improvised. And let's see what happens and then I'll see what this is like and get a drink of coffee here. I don't know, is any of this interesting to you folks? I hope it is. Try to keep it, not let it be boring. Going to the piano. So here's the Royal Blue Trickle Suite for today, 2025. From Hard Listening, Volume 1. Just getting adjusted here. Okay. Something like that. That's the Royal Blue Trickle Suite. So you can see already there's a lot of sections, and it's very compositional. This is kind of informal, like what you would do if you were doing a classical recital, because I wanted the the pianistic quality, and I wanted the compositional quality to take the music away from or outside of totally the cocktail lounge, as it were. I don't know if it's fully successful, but it's hard to be fully successful if all your musical language is, not all, but most of it is from the cocktail hour, because I happen to like that stuff. So that's the very first piece in this mode. And the newest is something I have here. It's called Précis, and I'm probably not pronouncing that perfectly or precisely. And it's inspired in part, actually, by Joanne Davis Woods, my girlfriend, and it refers to something that she has to do in her metalsmith craft. And it has to do with both the realization and the concept of something being so precise. I remember her talking about it has to be just perfect, it's very exact, little something that's made crafted. I thought, what would be interesting in music to express? And it's very much not really my style or mode, because I don't even really believe in perfection, really. And it's maybe for some people a guide, but I thought it would be interesting to be at least precise in the piece and get a sense of that. But it goes off into all sorts of directions. But I'm gonna come over here and get a drink first. So this is Précis, the French feminine pronunciation. Here it goes. Well, that's précis. And that's our solo show for November. I hope everything was clear and communicated out there to everybody. And please subscribe to our show and come back for more shows. This is it's a bit of work writing music like that, that kind of structure and that kind of yeah, we have a lot of stuff coming up. So I want to say happy Thanksgiving. Hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving and holidays coming up. Whatever you may be eating and wherever you may, whatever type of food you may be eating and wherever you might find yourselves. And I enjoyed playing some of this music for you, and both the very beginning and the most recent, the first and the last, right off of the Omega. So thank you, and have a great weekend.